So, in this message, this reflection, what I'm offering is to look at the art of life, to look at the systems and how they work and the processes and how they work. So, the biggest impediment to understanding this is defensiveness. So, go into this reflection with a deep breath. Go into it just allowing something new to be fancied within your experience, not trying to make anybody believe anything is true. This is simply an exploration of the system and how reality works. And so basically, it is, in my languaging, giving us direction, giving us signals to move us from paradigm A, the paradigm of struggle, the paradigm of trying to create worth, the paradigm of living life with regret, living life needing validation from the outside world, into this other experience where we're just experiencing life, when we're not attached to the system itself. But in order to look at the system, we have to look at the processes that happen within this system. So, however you want to phrase it, the ego, it doesn't matter that, but whatever the defensiveness is, it is going to want to tear apart the just looking at the process. In fact, as I'm sharing people the insights and the reflections, people that are not on this path, they will not even allow me to share a process, just simply stating a continuum where humans live within this continuum. They're constantly stopping me and saying, no, this isn't true, because they feel as if it's not true because that's their point of view. So it's to get past, to actually understand how the system works. We have to look at our defensiveness on holding on to negative belief systems, because really the question is, watching this video, are you excited about the world? Are you living in your chosen disposition? What does that mean? Well, my disposition is where I am right now. Happy. I'm in a place of clarity because my mind is not searching for stories or analysts on what is happening in the world. I'm here in this moment and I recognize the disposition that I hold. And that is the disposition that I'm constantly wanting to calibrate to harmonize to, is my favorite one. And from this position, I have clarity because I don't have a defense mechanism going on. Now, does that defense mechanism come up within me? Absolutely. The world is full of prickliness. It is full of things that push up against us to have us question what's going on. But it's how, that's the art of life, is how do we navigate those pricklies? And I'm making it as simple as possible to show a process in understanding that way. So in this video, there's going to be a meandering through many different ways that we can look at what I'm sharing. And so you may not pick up on certain things, but other things might connect with you. And the point is that later on you can go look back at this video. You can see, well, hey, what have I learned about this process, the art of life? And then these pieces activate within us. So basically, we're also going from the giver and the taker. That's the governance of psychology within paradigm A. You see this being played out. This is the beautiful thing when you see how this system is working. There is a movement in the culture to pin the tail on the narcissist. So people are obsessing about the villain. They're obsessing to figure out how to destroy the thing outside of them. And that would make it's trying to rearrange the world by our ideas and by our beliefs instead of just understanding that that's a part of what's going on here. There's an ebb and flow. And the nice part is that when you are in a raised elevation, your psychology takes care of itself. When you put all of your attention on the no self, on creating a hip hip hooray mind. And we're going to go through what that means here in a second. When you do that, you're free. You're free just to be yourself. But if you are still clinging to the system, you are going to be you're going to be fighting against the process. And your argument will be, well, this is just my unique perspective. This is what I believe in. And it's holding on to beliefs. That's your mind telling you that no, this isn't me. Everything that I'm saying is about an experience, not trying to figure out who you are. Okay. It's about getting rid of the idea of trying to be a grown up. Instead of trying to be a grown up, you go to the present moment and you live in a state of wonder. You live in the state, the disposition, where clarity rules the moment. And what happens? How do you get that? Well, you get that from agreeing with the moment. But if we are constantly trying to outgrow ourselves, in some way trying to become a grown up one day, there'll be a perfect example of me in the world one day. Instead of recognizing right in this moment that you are already whole and your goal is expansion, not growth, not linear growth. You're wanting to expand into this field that we have available. So how do we pull ourselves out of that system? And it's simply by this not being just this is a practice right now. This not being a struggle to you. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, it can't be this, it can't be this. Why? Why can't why won't your mind allow you to peruse ideas? And that is exactly how the system works. That's its process to keep you attached to the system. So this can go in many different ways. If we are attached in paradigm A to a system, then we're arguing about what 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 about the system where do I fit within the system? And we're constantly keeping score, which we don't realize we're doing because we're being motivated by what our mind tells us to how we interpret our emotions. So this is simply flipping the switch. This is flipping the switch to I am going to learn how to surf my emotions. I am not going to be learning how to control my emotions because that's the interesting thing. When we try to control our emotions, we are navigating by holding a standard within relationships. We are using their predigested ideas and our own predigestion that we're constantly doing with our mind, how we're judging our emotions and how we should feel about something. So this is about becoming free of the predigestion, leaving the predigested world that was there when we came into it, and discovering what was said by Christ, you be like children. That is in a state of wonder. What is that space? That space is a really beautiful disposition that we're looking for. And so I'm going to explain how do we find that space? So we look at the system, we look at the universe from a different perspective. We look at it as a mirror, that the mirror is reflecting back to us, a reflection back to us in order to make an adjustment in the world. But when we're attached to paradigm A, when we get a piece of data like a prickly from the outside world, let's say that there's somebody in a relationship that is insisting on their point of view, and then we take a defensive stance against that perspective, then we're in a control. We're being controlled by our will and the will of another. So instead, the system is about simply changing the Lensafarian lens, that when these prickles come up, the idea is that we work with our emotions. We work with our emotions so that we can surf our emotions, so that we aren't suppressing our emotions with our beliefs. That's the analytical mind trying to say, what should I believe in so I can grow up and be a good person? This is saying, this is flipping the script and saying, I want to be real. So where does the real you live? So how does this play out in your real world? In the real world, like boots on the ground. What we're doing is we are taking over the governance of our mind. Instead of governing our mind to control our emotions, what we are doing is we are governing our mind to allow our emotions to be our guide. So we are steadfastly saying to the universe, to the realness, to the wholeness, what we are saying is, I want to be real. That is the most important point. I want to be real. I want to be and play in my authentic self. And discover, once you understand the system, that what you become is you stop being a governance of this block of mental stories that we've trained our emotions to make us feel validated. That's the thing about those stories from Paradigm A, is we're constantly seeking validation outside of ourselves in order to think that we're growing. We're not striving for realness. So the hip hooray mind, and this is interesting. The feedback that I have gotten with this so far has been very interesting. The hip hooray mind. This is a very simple tool. And just trying to even, this was the perfect example of paradigm A wanting me to 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 be controlled by this outside process. People people regard whatever it is that they're holding as the way that, like, this is my unique expression. This is who I really am. So you have your way of looking at the world, and I'm like, wait, I'm not trying to instill within you that you change what you believe in. What I'm simply saying and bringing your attention to is a process that has the ability to actually be your authentic self. But again, there's the mind of paradigm A trying to argue up against a process. In this, it may seem silly to you, but I promise you, if you could hold on to this, because it is, if you feel like this is not something that you want to follow, because you've already got it worked out. Then I want to introduce the idea that this process is also how to help and be kind to other people, because you're moving in to a position of really showing everybody else outside of yourself how to get out of shame loops, how to get out of the obsessive mind, the mind that is always trying to calculate, how grateful should I be? How can I come up with words to share my gratitude? Or how when I feel regret, then the mind wants to go in and say, how much do I regret? And then I need to impress upon the other person how much regret should be given. And what we're simply doing in this process is removing all of that. And if that doesn't feel like freedom, man, I don't know what would be. So here's the process. You adopt a languaging. And I use these specific words, and not just because it is to me, but it has elements that go much deeper. So I would suggest if you're going to try this process, you adopt this particular language. And just because, why? Why not? Why do you have to hold on to? Why do you have to defend your own point of view? And see, what I'm doing is I'm processing through the feedback that I've already received from doing this process. So it's the Lensafarian mind. It's becoming a like creating a Lensafarian mind. What are we doing now? We are setting the mind up to look at the world as a mirror, to interpret feedback within the world from taking care of it in the moment to processing our emotions in the moment rather than getting the analytical mind to process it. So we are saying we're releasing that away. So here's the languaging. So this is how I would introduce it to somebody else, and this is how I'm introducing it to you. And so, and this is the interesting thing: if you take it up, it's good for you to take this up. And the reason is, let's stop what the reason is. Let's go with the process. So here's my language. If you have felt an unkind thought about me anywhere along this video, if you thought, oh, he's got bad glasses, his hair's off, his shirt doesn't fit right, couldn't he have set the camera up? Whatever that is, and if you caught yourself and you get a signal that you regret that that point of view that your mind chose to look at. So how you would express that back to me is you would simply, under this video, type hip hip hooray. And then I know there's an activation that has happened, but I don't know which activation. That's the cool thing. That's the mystery. That's for you to hold in your world, because I don't need the explanation, because I understand the universe is a mirror, and that our signals are activations and articulations that are moving us through time, not holding on to a bunch of pre-digested ideas. So here's the opposite side of that. If in this video you have felt, wow, there was something inspired me, something that you said inspired something, let loose something, made an articulation that you've been working on along the way, that you've realized is a blessing now in your life. Maybe you're going to have a lighter experience. You put together a little more piece of the puzzle, and it comes in and you're like, oh wow, I have this sense of gratitude. Well, here is the instruction. You in the comments type out hip hip hooray. and I will know that you have registered an activation, an articulation along your path. See, this completely changes, flips the script. It pulls us out of shame loops. It allows you to have guidance within your inner awareness, to catch yourself, to catch those prickly moments when you're making a judgment, where when you're making a judgment and you can recognize it, but you can actualize it. You don't have to. I'm what I'm telling you in this language is when that activation comes up, when you feel that sense of regret, you sit with that sensation, with that prickliness, and then you acknowledge it with a hip hip hooray. Because what normally would be going on is you would feel the regret, and then you would start to allow the analytical mind to say, why? And why would I do this? And am I a bad person? And this is a shame loop. And it's allowing you, using this language, to cut those off. And I'm giving you permission to do that with me. But if you're introducing this to other people, you're giving them the opportunity to do this work. So if you've ever been around somebody that over explains themselves and then you try to get into their world and you're trying to convince them like just to chill out with this. That's a shame loop. That's simply them trying to create worth using the mind to navigate their emotions rather than allowing their emotions to guide them to not that's all we're saying is we're no longer going to judge our emotions. Our emotions are our two true guide in this understanding of the world is a mirror. So we are not. Think about the systems that have been in place that try to suppress emotions. They try to say that one emotion is better than another one. So you should try to replace this emotion with this one. And there's somebody that's involved that is trying to get you to change that emotion. But what if you just started saying, hey, I trust my emotion? I was disappointed with what happened. So this is what happens in real time. So you're in a conversation and you feel disappointment. This is where we don't regard our disappointment as a bad thing, but we just change our system to go, oh, there's a signal from the universe that says, hey, I have an activation. I've been articulated. I felt disappointment in this point of view, in this moment. Let me activate it. That's simply saying, okay, I feel disappointment. And that's just agreeing with the emotion. I agree. I feel disappointed. Okay. Activate it. That means just simply sitting in it, acknowledging it. And then we say hip hip hooray to ourselves silently. Because what we're doing is we're telling the analytical mind, I've got this now. You don't have to work on this anymore. I am going to allow my emotions to guide me. And so the idea is that we learn to surf our emotions. And these can be big in the beginning, these big realizations. And it's kind of hard. The first thing you have to recognize is that voice in your mind that is grabbing on and starting the analytics. But once you get an idea of that, you really love the idea of more prickles in the world. I had this come up for me yesterday where I got into a conversation and I was trying to impress this process. Well, the feedback I got was like trying to tell me to go into their world and they needed validation from that what their world was, and I was like, I was able to recognize in that prickly, okay, I can see. So then I was able to go, okay, I have a signal that just came in. And I said, okay, let me reconcile that. And it was like, okay, I understand. Then I find the clarity and I'm like, oh, okay, I can see their position. They are trying to have me work inside of their story, along with their story on what they're believing in and what they're holding on to. And what I know is that's okay. That's okay. That's their choice. They get to do that. And so I had to pull myself back, and that helped me understand. And then I was able to clarify what I'm trying to share with you is a process. I'm not trying to challenge your beliefs. I'm just simply trying to set up a system with my ideas so that we can see. We could just like look at the universe, look at the system, look at the process, how it was done. And that brought both of us back into it was easy. Now they didn't have to defend themselves anymore. We took the personal out of it. But then what was interesting too was later on in the day, as I was, keeping the disposition that I like. I want to be high. I want to be in this beautiful now. I want to be in agreement with my now so that I am in a place of being inspired to the next choice that's going to happen in my life instead of dragging my past of regrets. But what was gnawing on me was looking as I was leaving, and my mind wanted to ponder the conversation. All of a sudden, it wanted to say to me, there was a voice that said, you weren't very, you weren't very on top of it when you were in the conversation. Like there was latency. You need to work on that. And that's the minute that I went, hip, hip, hooray. Caught that analytical mind. I said, nope, I don't want that perspective. Because what I want to do is I want to go back and say that that prickle that happened in that conversation was exactly what needed to be had in that conversation. I'm not trying to grow a personality from that. I'm not trying to refine myself. I'm not trying to become a grown up. I'm trying to become real. I'm trying to live in wonder, live free in the lightness of being who I truly am without having to validate myself from the outside world. And that's the process of Lensafarianism, cultivating that hip hip hooray mind. Because once we recognize that our emotions, we don't get into a battle with it. That's the cat chasing the tail in the game of trying to quell the ego. It isn't a matter of trying to quell the ego, which is the prickly emotions we have along the way. It is the mind story that has connected us to the system, to the pre-digested ideas. But to get away from it is to not be like going, where's the ego? Where's the ego? I need to figure out where my ego is. I got to quell my ego. No, you use your ego. You're looking for the prickly. You're now completely changing your world where you're looking for when you're prickled and you're simply changing your impression with it, the impression that comes with it. You're simply no you're simply saying there's an activation. So if I felt regret, simply saying that the universal mirror sent me a signal to say I should feel regret. So instead of going into the mind and trying to figure out how much regret, how do I hold on to this? How am I trying to grow? We're simply saying and acknowledging the feeling of regret, getting the analytical mind out of the way with a hip hip hooray. And then we can externalize this in a way we're showing everybody in the world our process. We're saying if we feel, we're externalizing in saying hip hip hooray. Just the fact that we are now looking at activation rather than growth. We're looking at the universe as a mirror, giving us exactly what we need in order for us to have the world of being childlike, to bring our imaginations back together, uh, bring the idea of wonder back into our world. And so there's going to be much more on this, but this was a very amazing reflection. And what's interesting is I would love feedback. I'd love lots of hip hip hoorays, whether something connected with you in this video or not, and whether it's it. But don't tell me. Just just recognize it. Practice. That's the beautiful thing about I'm a conscious mirror. I am a reflective intuitive. It's because what I'm sharing with you is I trust you. I trust you to manage your shame loops. I trust you to do this. So I am not going to will you to believe anything that I'm sharing with you. I'm trusting that you are doing the work yourself. I don't need to be updated on your progress on how you're working on your regret, your shame loops, your chasing psychology, pin the tail on the narcissist. I don't need updates on this. We're simplifying, we're getting out of the complexity of paradigm A, and simplifying it down to a Lensafarian perspective is that, yes, you have your own unique look at the world. But the thing that we can all do is change the perspective, our change and adjust our perspective so that our perception is beautiful. And from this point of view, we can love right freely everything. This is when we truly understand that love is in this process. As we deal with these, as we learn to work in communion with our emotions, where that is the process of love. That is chipping away what is false, what is not real about us. What I am suggesting is not to believe in something new, but to begin to follow your activations, to begin to explore the idea that wonder. We have a world, we have an educational system that was designed for one-upmanship. It was designed to reward us to gain knowledge to a system that was pre-digested for us, instead of being taught that our own emotions will bring us to enjoying knowledge, the curiosity and the wonder of this world. And that's all we're doing is looking at the system and pulling ourselves away from this. It's unlearning these processes that made us feel like we needed to somehow turn into a grown-up. I don't know where you're going to be in the world, because what I am exploring is this idea of putting you in a state of being inspired by life, being inspired by the moment, so that you can recognize that you're not learning anything new, that you already are in the dance, and you're just simply figuring out how to get into the flow of it with your unique expression. Pulling your mind to be, and always holding your mind to the idea of clarity, moving forward with clarity, not conclusions, because that's what resistance wants to cling on to. It wants to cling on to vestiges of the old system. It wants to say you need to be validated, and you have the right to be validated. You don't need to be validated. Once you trust your own emotions, you don't need validation. You are whole. You are real. You no longer have to perform a character that you've created in your mind of a personality of that you want to be. You just live your personality. You live into the personality that that your real self takes on, and you're no longer controlled by the world. You're no longer controlled by pre-digested ideas. You're now surfing reality, digesting the moment. We can do this from a hip hooray mind. So anytime, so that's the practice. That as we start to feel into these emotions, what we're feeling into is the disposition we hold when a thought comes across. So does the thought, so if I'm going in the day and all of a sudden I feel a heavy thought, I look at it. I look at the sensation, I look at it as a signal. What is this trying to tell me? It's wanting to pull me away from the disposition that I prefer. So I do not want my mind to analyze that emotion, because that's where we get caught in judging our own judging. We're using it as a signal and going, oh my gosh, I had a heavy thought, and that heavy thought is going to be a judgment. And so it's like, okay, that's the process. Recognize it as a signal. There's an activation and articulation that's happening, and to express that you have felt the feeling, you accept the feeling, hip hip hooray, and now your mind is free of following the path of a downward moving frequency. So I'm going to leave that here for now. Would love feedback. Also invite you to explore lots of other ideas that I have put out. Every video that I have is pointing you to this, and the way to watch my videos is to look at the prickles. That it's like practice, because I'm going to take many different perspectives, and you're looking for, as you go through it, what prickles you and why. Because I'm not seeking to get you to believe anything new. I'm simply having you look at your own intuitive guide, your own relationship with your emotions. That's what I do in my work with people, is that I reflect back to them where their prickles are. Super easy to find those prickles. And then we just practice in those reflections, activating them rather than talk therapy, where you're talking, we need to talk through our problems. That's the analytical mind. The idea is to head off, to become aware of the analytical mind that wants to take over the story and process it differently. That's all it is. It's a simple change in how we process the world and digest the world. So reach out to me, upvote the things that feel good. If things felt good in this, like this is moving to something more beautiful, that maybe we're going away from the heaviness and the brawn of paradigm A, and we're going into the light and novel and beautiful in paradigm B. Give it an upvote, pass it on, share it. Share, because you're recognizing your own activation within yourself, and you're saying, yeah, here's some higher consciousness, here's some higher clarity. Let's pass that on. I do the same thing as I'm going out, kind of seeing what everybody's up to. I'm finding people who are exploring this exact idea, but they're explaining it from a different point of view. And when I feel that, I feel the activation within me. I'm like, upvote, because I want more of that in the world. That, think about what the analytical mind's doing now with all the drama. It's choosing, people are choosing to reshare drama and gossip mind. So if we choosing where our attention goes, maybe we won't be looking how to destroy something else, but we will bring ourselves back to show the world that its beauty, its wonder, its imagination. I love you. And this process will help us remember that we love each other.